The galaxy had rules. Not laws exactly, no universal justice enforced by some higher power, but understandings. Patterns hardened into certainty over millions of years. Young civilizations rose, made noise, fought among themselves, and either burned out or were quietly folded into something larger. Older civilizations watched, measured, and decided whether the newcomers were useful, dangerous, or irrelevant. Humanity was filed neatly into the third category. They had appeared on the galactic stage less than 2 centuries earlier, clumsy and loud, broadcasting electromagnetic noise like children shouting into a cathedral. Their first faster-than-light experiments had torn brief scars into subspace, noticeable enough to draw survey probes from half a dozen empires. Those probes returned their data, a species divided into factions, technologically inconsistent, emotionally volatile, and confined to a single spiral arm fringe. Promising, perhaps, but not urgent. The Viox ascendancy had been the first to formally contact them, not out of interest, but convenience. Humanity's systems lay near a trade corridor, the ascendancy intended to reroute. The message was polite, translated into 26 human languages simultaneously, and delivered with all the gravity of inevitability. Relocate, submit, be absorbed. Humanity had asked for time. The request alone had amused the Ascendancy's council. Time was a resource granted by the powerful to the powerless, not something requested as if it were negotiable. Still, the Viox had allowed it. The humans posed no threat, and the delay cost nothing. Decades passed. Humanity did not expand aggressively. They did not militarize in any way the great powers considered alarming. No planet-cracking weapons, no reality-folding drives, no artificial intelligences that screamed into higher dimensions. Their ships remained small by galactic standards, their colonies clustered tightly together, their presence contained. They spoke often of cooperation, of mutual defense, of shared exploration. The galaxy listened less and less. When the Car Dominion began its expansion along the Orion Spur, humanity's worlds sat directly in the path. The Dominion was ancient, disciplined, and efficient. They did not conquer out of malice, but necessity. Their population cycles demanded new matter, new energy, new space. They sent a single notice: vacate or be removed. Humanity replied with a transmission broadcast on every known frequency, narrowband and wide, subspace and conventional. It was not a threat. It was not a declaration of war. It was a warning. We acknowledge your claim, the message said, calm and measured. We request negotiations. Forced displacement will result in consequences neither of us desires. The Car Dominion dismissed it without a reply. From their perspective, it was the bleating of a species that did not yet understand the hierarchy of the stars. The first human colony fell in 17 minutes. Orbital defenses failed almost instantly under Dominion mass drivers. Atmosphere boiled. Population centers were reduced to incandescent scars visible from orbit. No surrender was offered, none was requested. When news reached the Galactic Conclave, the reaction was muted. Such events were not uncommon. Expansion always carried friction. The Conclave recorded the loss, updated trade maps, and moved on. Humanity did not. Their second transmission came days later, after 3 more colonies burned. This one was shorter. Cease, we are invoking our right of self-defense. Final notice. The car commanders reportedly found the phrasing quaint. They accelerated their timetable. What the galaxy did not know, what it had no reason to suspect, was that humanity had been preparing for extinction since the moment they learned they were not alone. Not preparing to conquer, preparing to endure. Long before first contact, human astronomers had understood a brutal truth written into the cosmos. Intelligence survived by either becoming invisible or becoming untouchable. They had studied their own history, the rise and fall of empires on a single world, and projected those lessons outward. They assumed, correctly, that older civilizations would not be kind. So they built quietly. They invested not in spectacle but depth, redundancy, distributed infrastructure, technologies that looked inefficient to outside observers because their true purpose was hidden beneath layers of misdirection. Their fleets were not large because they were not meant to be seen. Their weapons did not glow because they were not meant to intimidate. And their greatest defense was not military at all. It was silence. When the fifth colony fell, humanity went dark. No broadcasts, no trade signals, no diplomatic traffic. Their systems appeared abandoned, their starports cold. To the outside observer, it looked like a species in collapse, another brief flicker snuffed out by the indifferent mechanics of galactic survival. The Car Dominion moved deeper, meeting only token resistance. A few skirmishes with outdated human patrol craft, some automated defenses that failed predictably, nothing that slowed the advance in any meaningful way. Then, at the edge of human-controlled space, the Dominion encountered something unexpected. An empty system. No planets, no stations, no ships. Just a faint signal, repeating on a tight-beam quantum channel, addressed not to the Dominion alone, but to every known major power in the galaxy. The Conclave flagged it immediately. So did the Ascendancy. So did dozens of others who still maintained long-range monitoring arrays. The signal was unmistakably human. "This is humanity," the transmission said. "To all who receive this, you chose not to listen before. We are asking you to listen now." There was no panic in the voice, no anger. Only exhaustion. "We have attempted coexistence. We have accepted losses you would consider intolerable. We have retreated, negotiated, complied, and endured. The attacks on our worlds continue." A brief pause followed, long enough to suggest deliberation, not hesitation. "This message is not a plea for intervention. It is a statement of record." The star maps displayed alongside the transmission showed human territory shrinking, systems marked black one by one. "When this transmission ends," the voice continued, "we will initiate measures to ensure our survival. Those measures will alter the strategic balance of the galaxy." Another pause, longer this time. "If you believe this is an exaggeration, you may ignore it as you have ignored us. If you believe it is a threat, understand that it is not directed at you." The final words carried a weight that unsettled even the oldest listeners. "It is directed at the future." The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, analysts debated its meaning. Some dismissed it as bluster, a species lashing out in its final moments. Others flagged it as potential destabilization rhetoric, worthy of monitoring but not immediate action. The Car Dominion, confident and unchallenged, advanced. 17 hours later, the stars went quiet around their forward fleet. Every ship in the vanguard, over 300 capital vessels, ceased transmissions simultaneously. No distress calls, no energy spikes, no evidence of battle. They simply vanished from all sensors, as if they had never existed. The galaxy noticed that. And for the first time since humanity had spoken its final warning, the great powers began to wonder if they had made a catastrophic mistake. The Car Dominion did not panic when its vanguard vanished. Panic was an emotional artifact, and the Dominion had spent 10,000 years engineering such inefficiencies out of its command culture. What it did instead was far more dangerous. It assumed error. Sensor ghosts, localized subspace interference, a miscalculated transition window, these explanations were comfortable, familiar. They preserved the Dominion's understanding of the universe as a place governed by predictable rules, rules they had mastered long ago. A secondary fleet was dispatched within the hour. Smaller, faster, packed with observation platforms and redundant communications arrays. Their orders were explicit: locate the vanguard, determine the cause of the disruption, and resume the advance. They never reached the coordinates. At precisely the same boundary, an invisible line marking the former edge of human territory, the Second Fleet's telemetry fractured, not failed, fractured. Signals arrived out of sequence, time-stamped seconds apart yet spatially impossible, as if the ships were reporting from multiple locations simultaneously. Then those signals stopped too. This time, the Dominion took notice. High Command convened in the Black Citadel above Car Prime, an artificial structure older than many stars, its interior carved from compressed matter dense enough to warp local gravity. Strategists reviewed data streams in silence, their multifaceted eyes tracing probability curves that no longer aligned. There was no debris field, no radiation bloom, no subspace wake. The fleets had not been destroyed. They had been removed. Word spread quickly, first through encrypted channels, then through rumor. Other powers began reviewing their own long-range sensor logs, searching for anomalies they might have ignored. Patterns emerged, subtle but undeniable. At the exact moment of the First Fleet's disappearance, background cosmic noise in the region had dropped by a fraction of a percent. Not enough to register as an alarm, but enough to be measurable in hindsight. It was as if a portion of the universe had been muted. The Galactic Conclave reconvened in emergency session for the first time in over 3 centuries. Delegates filled the chamber, the crystalline minds of the Talaris Compact, the biosynthetic choir of Enhem, the ancient ascendancy representative. Ease whose species no longer remembered their own planet of origin. Holographic star maps rotated slowly at the chamber's center, human space highlighted in a warning amber. At the periphery stood the human envoy. She had been there for years, technically, assigned a seat after first contact, largely ignored, her presence more symbolic than functional. Humanity had never held enough territory or influence to warrant serious consideration. Now, for the first time, eyes turned toward her. She did not look triumphant. If anything, she looked tired. The Car Dominion demands an explanation, one of the ascendancy delegates intoned, its voice a layered chorus of harmonic tones. If humanity is responsible for the loss of Dominion assets, you will answer for it. The human envoy inclined her head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement, not submission. "We are responsible," she said. The chamber erupted, not in sound, but in data, probability spikes, threat assessments, tactical simulations spinning up in parallel across 1,000 minds. "You admit to hostile action," another delegate pressed. "We admit to defensive action," she replied calmly, "as stated in our final transmission." The car representative projected its presence into the chamber, a towering armored form rendered in perfect fidelity. Its voice carried the weight of certainty forged through uncounted victories. "You possess no weapons capable of this outcome," it declared. "Our intelligence confirms this." The human envoy met its gaze without flinching. "Your intelligence was accurate," she said, "about our weapons." That gave them pause. Across the chamber, an analyst from the Enhem choir interjected, its tone unusually sharp. "Clarify." Humanity had always been transparent to a fault. They shared schematics, allowed inspections, opened research archives. It had been another reason they were dismissed. No secrets worth stealing meant no power worth fearing. The Env gestured, and a new display bloomed to life. It was not a weapons schematic. It was a map of spacetime distortions layered across centuries. "We did not build better guns," she said. "We built better shelters." The projection zoomed in on human space, not as it had appeared on conventional maps, but as it truly existed beneath the surface. Gravitational anchors, subspace stabilizers, massive constructs hidden inside stars, inside rogue planets, inside regions of space that appeared empty because sensors were subtly encouraged to look elsewhere. "You fortified your territory," the car representative said dismissively. "That does not explain." "We fortified reality," the envoy interrupted, her voice still even, but now edged with something sharper. She highlighted the boundary where the Dominion fleets had vanished. "That line marks the edge of our continuity zone." Silence fell. The term meant nothing to them, and that was the problem. "For 2 centuries," she continued, "we assumed that if we were discovered by a hostile galaxy, we would not survive through force of arms. So we asked a different question." The map shifted, showing equations rendered visually, curvatures, feedback loops, layers of spacetime folded with surgical precision. "What if survival didn't require victory?" she asked. "What if it required refusal?" The conclave struggled to follow. Even the ascendancy, masters of dimensional engineering, found gaps in the logic, places where the math implied something that should not be possible. The envoy let the silence stretch. "When your fleets crossed into our zone," she said, "they encountered a region of space where causality is locally enforced." The phrase rippled through the chamber. "Enforced how?" demanded the car. "By us," she answered simply. "Within our territory, events are allowed to proceed only if they do not result in human extinction." That was when fear truly began. "You claim dominion over cause and effect," one delegate whispered. "No," the envoy said, "we claim responsibility for it." She changed the display again. This time it showed the vanished fleets, not destroyed, not drifting, but suspended. Frozen in perfectly stable spacetime pockets, their crews alive, time barely passing. "They are not dead," she said. "They are contained." The car representative's certainty fractured for the first time. "You imprison entire fleets without engagement," it said. "This is an act of war beyond." "It is an act of restraint," the envoy cut in. "We could have collapsed the zone. We could have erased them entirely. We did not." The conclave erupted now, voices overlapping, data channels saturated with alarm. If humanity was telling the truth, and the evidence was mounting that they were, then the balance of power had shifted overnight. Not through conquest, through denial. "What happens next?" asked the ascendancy delegate, its tone carefully neutral. The human envoy's expression softened, just slightly. "That depends," she said, "on whether the galaxy believes our final transmission was the end of a conversation or the beginning of one." Before anyone could respond, alerts flared across the chamber. Multiple systems, far beyond human space, were reporting the same phenomenon. Stars dimming, communications lagging, fleets vanishing at the edges of newly forming continuity zones. Human space was not expanding. It was propagating. The envoy did not smile. "We warned you," she said quietly. "Survival required measures that would alter the strategic balance of the galaxy." She met their collective gaze. "We never said those measures would stop at our borders." The first empire to break was not the weakest. It was the fastest. The Illyrian Reach had built its power on velocity, ships that could cross light years in heartbeats, doctrines that valued initiative over caution, and an economy optimized for rapid expansion. When the continuity zones began appearing along its outer trade corridors, the Reach assumed it was a navigational hazard, perhaps a side effect of whatever anomaly humanity had unleashed. They attempted to outrun it. Their scouts vanished at the boundary, their couriers followed. When a full-strike flotilla attempted a blind micro-jump through the region, every vessel emerged intact and immobile, engines unresponsive, weapons inert. Time itself seemed to thicken, like syrup poured over reality. Within hours, the Illyrian Reach's logistical backbone collapsed. No battles were fought, no shots fired. Their empire simply stopped moving. Across the galaxy, panic metastasized. Empires that had once measured power in fleet tonnage and planet counts found those metrics suddenly meaningless. Continuity zones did not care about mass or firepower. They did not register as hostile energy signatures. They could not be targeted, hacked, or negotiated with by conventional means. They were not a weapon. They were a rule. At the heart of human space, buried beneath a star whose light had been carefully tuned to appear ordinary, the architects of that rule watched the galaxy react. The place was called the Archive, not because it stored history, but because it preserved possibility. It existed partially outside conventional spacetime, anchored by a lattice of gravitational constants humanity had learned to edit with excruciating care. Inside, thousands of minds worked in quiet coordination. Some were human, some were not. That more than anything had terrified the conclave when it was revealed. Humanity had not built the continuity zones alone. They had found others. Species that had been erased from galactic records. Civilizations labeled extinct after losing wars no one remembered. Minds that had survived as fragments, data ghosts, cryoseeds, self-contained ecosystems hidden in rogue asteroids. Humanity had listened when no one else had. They had offered shelter instead of assimilation. Now those survivors stood with them, bound not by empire, but by a shared vow, never again. On the Archive's primary observation deck, Admiral Reyes watched a live projection of the conclave chamber. The debate had devolved into something raw and desperate. "They're asking for terms," an aide reported quietly. Reyes nodded. He had expected this moment and dreaded it. Terms meant power, power meant temptation. "Open the channel," he said. The human envoy appeared on the projection, her calm facade finally cracking as exhaustion bled through. She had not slept in days. "Admiral," she said, "they're afraid." "They should be," Reyes replied, "but fear isn't enough." A new voice joined the channel, one not heard in the conclave before. It belonged to the Talaris Compact, a species of distributed consciousness that experienced emotion as mathematical imbalance. "You have demonstrated capability beyond precedent," the Talaris said. "Explain your objective." Reyes stepped into view. "Our objective is simple," he said, "to end predation as a viable strategy." That sent shockwaves through the chamber. "You intend to police the galaxy," the Ascendancy demanded. "No," Reyes said firmly, "we intend to remove incentives." He gestured, and the projection shifted again, this time showing a predictive model of galactic expansion patterns. Empires expanding until resistance made further growth inefficient. Smaller species crushed in the margins, the cycle repeating endlessly. "This system exists because conquest works," Reyes said, "because it's cheaper to take than to cooperate. We changed the math. The car representative bristled. You have frozen our fleets, paralyzed our expansion. You call this cooperation. I call it mercy, Reyes answered. Your fleets still exist. Your crews are alive. Your empire still stands. For now, the car hissed. Reyes met its gaze. For always, if you choose restraint. The room fell into a fragile silence. Then came the question everyone had been avoiding. What happens, the essay? Endancy asked slowly, if we resist. Reyes did not answer immediately. He turned just slightly and nodded to someone off-screen. The archive responded. Across the galaxy, continuity zones pulsed, not expanding, not contracting, but resolving. Within them, trapped fleets experienced a sudden release. Time resumed. Systems came back online. But something fundamental had changed. Every weapon system within those fleets now returned a null response. Not damaged, not hacked. Simply disconnected from causality. They could still function mechanically, power flowed, targeting systems locked, but when a firing command was issued, the event failed to propagate. The universe refused to acknowledge the outcome. You see, Reyes said quietly, as reports flooded in, we don't need to destroy you. He let that sink in. We can make violence irrelevant. The implications were staggering. War, the ultimate arbiter of galactic order, had just been rendered optional. The car dominion reeled, so did every empire built on force. This is tyranny, someone accused. No, Reyes replied, this is consequence. He leaned forward. For millennia, the consequence of aggression was victory. Now it is stagnation. You may rule what you hold. You may defend what is yours, but you may not grow by extinction. The conclave erupted again, but this time the arguments were different, not whether humanity was lying, not whether they could be stopped, but whether the galaxy could survive unchanged. Amid the chaos, a new alert flared, one Reyes had hoped never to see. A continuity zone had failed. Not collapsed, not breached. Overridden. Coordinates flooded in, deep core space, a region long considered empty, avoided by all for reasons lost to time. Something old had noticed the change in rules. And it was not pleased. The lights in the archive dimmed as gravitational constants shifted. Reyes straightened, a grim resolve settling over him. Looks like the galaxy's been avoiding a bigger predator, he muttered. The human envoy turned toward him, fear and resolve warring in her eyes. And now, she asked. Reyes looked at the spreading anomaly, at the thing that even empires feared. Now, he said, we find out if mercy is enough, or if we have to remind the universe why it learned to fear extinction in the first place. The anomaly did not announce itself with fire or fleets. It announced itself with absence. Entire constellations in the deep core began to lose definition, their stars smearing into probability haze as if reality itself were forgetting how to hold them together. Sensors returned contradictory data, mass without gravity, energy without source, time without direction. The species that had skirted that region for millennia finally remembered why. The veiled expanse. A scar left behind by something older than empire, older than the idea that the universe was a neutral place. The conclave's panic sharpened into something colder when fragments of ancient records surfaced, warnings etched into dead languages, myths dismissed as allegory. They spoke of an intelligence that did not conquer territory. It edited outcomes. The human continuity zones had not attracted a rival. They had triggered a response. Within the archive, Alarms cascaded through layers of reality. The lattice strained, gravitational anchors screaming under forces they were never designed to counter. For the first time since its construction, the archive experienced measurable time drift. Admiral Reyes stood at the center of it all, watching projections of the veiled expanse bleed outward. Identification, an analyst asked, though the question was already obsolete. We are calling it the null accord, another replied, not because that's what it is, but because that's what it leaves behind. Reyes exhaled slowly. Intent. A pause, then unknown, but it appears to be correcting us. Humanity's great gamble had been built on a single assumption, that the universe tolerated intervention if it preserved life. The null accord challenged that premise at a fundamental level. It was not hostile. It was absolute. Continuity zones near the expanse began to fail, not violently, but neatly, their enforced causality unraveling thread by thread. Fleets once immobilized found themselves abruptly free again. The Car Dominion did not hesitate. Centuries of instinct overrode weeks of fear. Strike groups surged forward, eager to reclaim relevance, to reassert dominance before the balance could shift again. Reyes watched the trajectories populate the map and did not stop them. The human envoy's voice came through the channel, tight with disbelief. You're letting them go. Yes, Reyes said. You're risking everything we built. No, he replied softly, I'm testing it. The first car fleet entered the expanse's outer boundary. They did not vanish. They did not freeze. They ceased to have ever chosen that path. From the perspective of the galaxy, the fleet simply failed to arrive. Records contradicted themselves. Logs rewrote. Commanders who had issued the orders now remembered choosing differently, deploying elsewhere, delaying, rerouting. Only the archive, insulated from temporal correction, retained the truth. The null accord was not killing aggressors. It was erasing the decision to be aggressive. A chill settled over Reyes. This thing doesn't punish violence, he murmured. It prevents it. The implications were horrifying. A universe without war sounded like paradise, until one realized it also meant a universe without choice. The Conclave saw it too. This entity will sterilize history, the Ascendancy warned. No conflict, no divergence, no freedom. And no extinction, countered another delegate, desperate. Reyes cut the channel. Get me the coalition, he ordered. Not the Conclave. The survivors. The species humanity had sheltered, the minds that had lived under the shadow of annihilation. They answered immediately, their faces, alien and human alike, filling the projection. This ends badly, Reyes said without preamble, for everyone. They understood at once. They had seen this before, in different forms. Powers that promised safety at the cost of agency. Solutions that solved suffering by removing the capacity to choose otherwise. What do you need? One asked. Reyes turned back to the map. We built the continuity zones to say no to extinction, he said. The null accord says no to change. He looked at them, eyes burning. We need to remind the universe that survival without will isn't survival at all. The plan was terrifying in its simplicity. Humanity would stand down. Every continuity zone would be dismantled slowly, deliberately, in full view of the galaxy, not collapsed, not sabotaged, but released. Causality returned to open space, unguarded. The Conclave erupted in protest. You will doom us, they cried. Reyes did not argue. He addressed the null accord instead. For the first time, humanity transmitted directly into the expanse, not with force, not with containment, but with intent encoded into spacetime itself. A message written in probability, not language. We choose risk. The universe held its breath. The null accord responded, not with erasure, with hesitation. The anomaly's expansion slowed, then stalled. The expanse stabilized, not retreating, not advancing. It was watching. Reyes felt something close to awe. It's not a tyrant, he realized. It's a safeguard. One that had never encountered a species willing to accept the cost of freedom. Humanity had always assumed the universe was indifferent. They had been wrong. The accord withdrew, not entirely, but enough. A reminder, not a ruler. The veiled expanse remained a boundary, no longer growing. Across the galaxy, empires recalculated. Without continuity zones, war was possible again, but it had lost its innocence. Every species now knew what unchecked aggression attracted. They had seen the universe push back. Humanity did not rebuild its zones. Instead, they offered something harder. A pact, not enforced by causality, but by memory. A shared understanding that extinction-level behavior would not just be answered by victims, but by reality itself. The conclave dissolved months later, replaced by something smaller, slower, and more careful. Humanity did not rule the galaxy. They became its conscience, not because they were strongest, but because they had been willing to let go of absolute power when it mattered most. In the end, the stars did not go quiet forever. They learned to listen. And for the first time in galactic history, silence was not the absence of voices, but the presence of choice.